Half Past Two by U A Fanthorpe is a clever poem told from the perspective of a young child. It is an 11-stanza poem that is divided into tercets or sets of 3 lines. The poet chose to compose this piece in free verse. This means that the poem does not have a set rhyme scheme or metrical pattern. The lines are of very different lengths, with the speaker using the voice of an innocent, youthful child. There are clever uses of language and words that get combined together to evoke the way a child talks. For example, time to go home now time and time you are off time. This allows the reader to understand the world in the same way a child does. In the first lines of this poem, the speaker, a child, describes how a child did something very wrong. Their teacher told them this was the case and that they had to stay after school till 2:30. But it is soon revealed that the teacher had never taught the child time, and therefore he had no concept of it. All he knew were phrases like getting up time and time you were off time. The clock meant nothing to him, so he waited outside of time and unbothered. Finally, after forgetting about him, the teacher finds him again and sends him home. First, second, and third stanza. The narration in this series of stanzas immediately relates to the vernacular and mindset of the child who did something very wrong and had to stay in the schoolroom till 2:30. That clear connection is established through simple choices, like the capitalization of words that would be significant to the child. For instance, something very wrong has no grammatical rationale for being capitalized, since there is no proper noun within that phrasing. To a child, though, this concept of having done wrong would be so significant as to merit the status of a proper noun. Likewise, the person in authority over the child is not referred to by a noun, but even the pronoun bestowed upon her is capitalized. This shows a great amount of importance and superiority connected to the adult by the child. Essentially, the situation would be so cut and dry to the child that the authority figure would merit capitalization, even without the usage of a proper noun. Time is another word that would not need to be capitalized for an adult, but the idea was so mysterious to the child that it extended beyond the commonality of a typical noun. Additionally, time is the core concept in this poem, since the child was being disciplined till a certain time, without understanding the concept well enough to know what 2:30 meant. Time was the stress factor for this child, one that was larger than the child's comprehension, so what would have been a regular noun is treated as a proper noun. Another concept that showcases this as a child's dilemma is that he was afraid to confront the adult about his concerns, not because he was afraid of the adult herself. Rather, he was too scared at being wicked. This indicates he was concerned over a label that would have been given to him by an adult, which is a child's mentality as well. Furthermore, in these stanzas, the reader can see the disconnect between the adult and the child, since the narrator, the child in his older years, does not remember what the something very wrong was, while the adult was adamant that it was significant enough to merit punishment. In fact, the narration hints that she was so aggravated about this something very wrong that she did not realize that 2:30 had no meaning to the child, since he hadn't taught him time. Fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh stanza. These stanzas continue with successfully detailing the something very bad and time dilemma as a child by exploring the concept of time in a childish manner. Just as school time was combined into one word to reveal that the idea was one united concept, the words that reference different notions of time in stanzas 4 through 8 expresses the same trait. Getting up time, time you're off time, time to go home now time, TV time, and time for me kiss time are all ideas that would be relevant to a child in regard to being awoken by a parent for school, having to leave under the instruction of an adult, watching favorite shows, and gaining affection from a relative. These are concepts that would surface in a child's day, and they would be so significant to a child, so solidly a part of their life, that it is reasonable that they are treated as one-word concepts. This strategy continues when the narration addresses once upona, which is a childish fairy tale time, and time fors, which is vague enough to apply to a number of guided activities that a child would experience during their day, as in time for lunch or time for bed. Scaling back these times into ideas that are not the way a clock face would reveal them connects to a childish mentality just as much as rushing them together in single words. Another element that is at work with using the mentioned once upona choice is that it is linked to the stress the child felt in regard to his 2:30 punishment. This fairy tale concept elevates the scenario into something larger than reality, as if the child were stuck in a new realm of mystery and wonder by having to deal with 2:30. This out-of-reach feel is reinforced in the 8th stanza, where common details like chrysanthemums and a hangnail hint that the situation was commonplace to the adult, while the child was so overwhelmed that he was like the air outside the window into ever. This once more represents the disconnect between the adult and child as well, since it is mundane for the adult but as never-ending and uncertain as air and ever to the child. It is also worth noting that in stanza 4, time is not capitalized as it was in stanza 3. This reveals a varied level of significance for different time ideas. Clearly, the child understood and was comfortable with some concepts. Those are lowercase to show their commonality, but others were so mysterious that they require capitalization. This overall uncertainty about time is addressed in the childish explanation of the clock as well, since the child's little eyes could see it, but he couldn't click its language to understand what it meant. 8th, 9th, 10th, and 11th stanza. The disconnect between the authority figure and the child becomes more pronounced in stanza 9 when she came into the room to declare she forgot all about the child and that he needed to run along or he'd be late. To the child, this experience had been so vast that it felt like ever, massive and unending. This moment, however, was so insignificant to the adult that she forgot about it. This is a twist to the earlier stanzas where the child did not necessarily understand what his something very wrong was, showing how insignificant the act was to him, while the adult found the act so significant that she insisted on punishment. The adult, it seems, was focused on the action that was wrong, while the child was focused on the punishment itself. Once more, then, the reader can see a disconnect. In fact, this punishment of waiting until 2:30 was so momentous to the child that he never forgot it, and he treated it in his mind as escaping into the clockless land forever. Since he did not know the time, essentially, time felt endless and non-existent, as if was waiting to be born or had stopped completely. Within the changes of capitalization, though, the reader can find a similarity between the adult and the child, since just as the adult changed her mind on how important this punishment was, she forgot, after all. The child seemed to change his mind on concepts enough to take them from uppercase to lowercase ideas. The words time and she become lowercase as the poem progresses, which indicates that their level of rank shifted as grandly as the adult's take on the punishment. In this, even though the adult and child were at odds on the ideas of time and something very wrong, they seem to reflect one another in their changing decisions on what is important and what is not. The stanzas also continue with the childish concepts of time by addressing different times in one-word blends, and the child's mentality prevails as the primary focus of 2:30. As similar as the adult and child turn out to be, the child's misunderstanding and the otherworldly dilemma of not understanding time is the core element, one that allows the reader to see such a simple prospect through the eyes of a child. This innocence is a driving force of the stanzas, and it creates the childlike atmosphere that depicts a situation where adults and children are separate in thought, but still united on some level. I hope this video has provided you with a better understanding of the poem, its key themes and ideas, as well as some of the language and structural features. If you have found this video to be useful, please like and comment and perhaps share with your friends. Please also subscribe for similar content.